Welcome back to the Engine Rehab channel, and I've got a new segment for you. I've got the computer set up right here and cameras going over here, and we're going to read off my Instagram, YouTube, Reddit comments and questions. And we're going to talk about industry today. As you can tell, all the lights are off, and we are just hanging out. And I may or may not have partaken in the brown drink, so bear with me. But this will be a good time because I've been meaning to do a video like this for a while, and here we are. I grace you with my presence. And let's just jump right into it. So the first question is from Precision Boost Power. Before I watched the video, I always wondered how you clean the parts in your garage shop, especially bigger stuff like this Lambo head. I know you have an ultrasonic cleaner for smaller parts. Do you have a parts washer as well? I would love to see a dedicated cleaning, a video dedicated to cleaning and the products you use. So cleaning is really hard when you're at home on regular power and you don't have access to big parts washers, essentially giant engine parts dishwashers. And plus chemicals and waste disposal is a real issue. I have some pretty clever tricks behind my sleeve, which is this machine. That is the System 1 parts washer, and I got that thing for a really good deal used. And if I told you how much I paid for that, you'd hurt. You'd be very sad. But I got a deal, and I'm very happy. These things new are somewhere around $6,000 and upward, but you can find pretty good deals online used for some older models or ones that have been in, might be a little clapped out, but functionally they're probably going to work great. These are solvent tanks, and solvent tanks are a real issue. A lot of people are concerned about safety, a lot of worries about pollutants, and there are health risks. Particularly, solvent will melt your nervous system, and you don't want to do that. So you wear gloves, respirator, etc., etc., etc. But go back, think about that old garage, old shop you've been in, and there's that crusty, rusty, red drum filled with dirty black solvent that some old timer's been holding on to. That's the main issue. Solvent will get inundated with all the oils and dirt and garbage, and what do you do with it? Because you can't just turn it into used oil disposal at your local auto parts store. Used solvent's kind of a bear to hold on to and get rid of. These things will essentially distill the dirty solvent and separate the waste oil from the good clean solvent, and then it pours it back into its own reservoir. So they're environmentally friendly, and they deal with the chemical waste easily, because once it's separated, I literally pour it into a waste oil jug and bring that to the auto parts store. And every once in a while, maybe once every 2-3 years, I might top it off with a little solvent. Seems like a good deal to me. On top of that, I've also got that little tiny Chinese sonic cleaner way back in the corner, which you've seen me use sparingly. It's fine, but I'll degrease a head in the solvent tank, and then I'll go and get that all dry, do a final degrease in the sonic cleaner, and then from there it's a bunch of wire wheeling and hand cleaning, and I'm good to go. That could probably be a pretty good video talking about cleaning, and that's really, I could spend 2 hours talking about that specifically. I try not to use glass beads. I don't like glass beads unless the head is totally ratty and trashed. So, I also don't have the air supply here because I'm basically running everything off of a little contractor's air compressor that has maybe 20 gallons total. So I don't even think I have 20 gallons, but it's enough to run an impact every once in a while, or it's enough to run my seat and guide machine when I need to do it. Mostly I just need the air for an air nozzle for blowing chips out. Oh, all right. And then if I need to use equipment that I don't have, I'll just leave. I have friends in town. I know lots of machine shops. I'm pretty well connected. I'll go out and just borrow a machine if I have to. So that's what I'd recommend. If you're somebody working from home or you're just a home gamer working on your own projects, take your parts. Don't bother trying to clean them at home, especially if you've got a bunch of greasy, nasty parts. Drop them off at the machine shop. Go, hey, I need this clean. If you're a freak and you need something surgically cleaned, just tell them that. If they don't want to clean your parts, move on. There's another shop that'll do it for you. So, next question comes from Super Dave Outdoors. That's a name I see a lot. He's been following me on Instagram and YouTube since the beginning. Oh, look. Have you touched on the clouds yet? No, I have not. Jamsey has joined us. I see the guy who's obsessed with Crown Vics. Thanks for joining in. Nick, I'm sorry that I would love to text you back, but my phone's over there on a little tiny tripod. So, Super Dave Outdoors asks, is this for Jay Leno's car? He's referring to the Mercedes that I worked on last week, and that was a pretty good video. And no, the 300 SL that I'm working on is not the one that Jay Leno owns. And in fact, I think the video that he just showed of the junkyard 300 SL that was literally a survivor car, that wasn't his car. So I think some people might be misunderstanding that. But no, definitely not working for Jay Leno. And if I did, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you. So if this 300 SL belongs to a collector in town, and I have all the parts for that. Thankfully, I was able to get all the guides, which I thought was going to turn into a major pain in the ass. Oh, and Precision Boost Power, we were just talking about you. You'll see that in the replay, probably. But I answered some of your questions, but that's really going to have to be a video in its own. So we'll come back to the cleaning parts question later on. Where was I? All the parts for the Mercedes are here. So I got lucky enough to get my freaking valve guides. They're not exactly, kill this light. Whoa, lighting is an issue. That's my exhaust guide, the new exhaust guide for the Mercedes. We did not have to pay $75 a piece for these freaking guides. Mercedes Classic Center, which is the factory support center or factory parts warehouse for all their legacy vehicles, they had these oversized exhaust guides in stock. And I think they had 8 of them. I needed 6. We'll take them. I'll figure it out. The biggest issue, and I'm probably going to do this off camera, is these are 7 thousandths oversized. I needed a 2 thousandths oversized valve guide. So I've either got to turn down this outside diameter or I'm going to have to blow out the holes in the head. I'm not sure what I want to do. I'll probably turn down these valve guides, but they were not $75 a piece. They were $30 a piece. So good for this dude. You got to save a little money on his $1 million car. And SI Valves had the exact intake guides that I needed. And they have the correct chamfer right at the top. Everything's going to work out here. I just need to make a driver for both of these so that I can push on these shoulders for installation, because with how thin the top of these guides are, pounding on it ain't going to work. So that's a problem for next week. I'm not going to mess around with that today. Nor am I going to do it tomorrow. I've got more important things to do, which is everything else that I'm behind on. Ugh. Okay. Whoa. I spilled my drink. Somebody asks, are those guides the same as material as original? They are not. They are a better material. They're manganese bronze. The original valve guides on the intake side were pure copper, which didn't work. And then the intake guides, or no, the exhaust guides were replacement valve guides. So they were not pure copper, but they were some kind of silicon or aluminum bronze. So no worky, too soft. Didn't last. Well, it lasted 25 years, but only a small amount of driving, regular amount of driving. And yes, they are manganese. Okay, let's move on to another question. Marcus Hightower, he asks, I need an explanation of how argon and helium differ when welding. My 3 semesters of chemistry can't guess why. AI and I are not talking for reasons. You know, I wish I understood the mechanics behind why helium gives you more heat input when you're welding on aluminum, but helium, to my understanding, excites the molecules or whatnot, and it makes things vibrate, and that translates into extra heat inputted into the part. I don't know. I'll have to look that up and come back to you, but I'm not that smart. Listen, I barely got out of bed and made it out here today, and after a few cold ones, I'm not okay. Now, the next one, adios. See you later, Jimmy or Nicholas. Probably Nicholas. Jimmy doesn't speak Spanish. Let's see. Robert Peters. Why do all Audi and VW owners kill their engines? So that was a response to a viral short that I made satirizing Audi owners. So, which is ironic because I own an Audi. And I have been dabbling pretty heavily in the German vehicles lately. After a lifelong ownership, General Motors ownership run or a career or whatever you'd call it, I've always owned GM vehicles. But over the past few years, I've been replacing everything with German cars, and it's mostly Volkswagen Audi Group products and Porsche stuff, which is Volkswagen Audi Group. And we own a Mercedes, all of which are capable of being good cars. But why are so many bad ones on the road? That's because once you get to your second, third, fourth, and fifth owners, each owner progressively caring less and less about the vehicle or being unable of keeping up with deferred maintenance, that snowballs into a bigger situation of where most of these older and older, being anything over 7-8 years old by the model year, those cars tend to be pretty clapped out by the time you've taken possession of your used $20,000 Audi A4. They're great vehicles, but once they get screwed, once they get neglected enough, it's like your old lady. When her and I were dating, it was great at first, but I got screwed enough times. She tried to poke me with the poker a few too many times. I got a little decrepit, and I wasn't as reliable as I used to be. The highly depreciated European vehicle is going to do that to you. And the reason they fight you is a lot of them rely on little tiny oil holes all throughout their engines that aren't going to stand up to neglect. So, oil turns into varnish. That starts plugging things up. The little oil holes are really good because as soon as oil pump and oil pressure starts circulating through that engine, it's going to fill up all those oil galleys right now, and and the hydraulic systems in the engine are going to work immediately. But oftentimes when that stuff's been neglected, that original function, which is great when everything's working correctly, those hydraulic systems, they become really quickly hindered when maintenance has been neglected. So I like European cars, but you probably shouldn't buy them if you aren't looking for a needy ownership experience. If you're the type that neglects your vehicles and you don't want to end up at the machine shop, you should probably buy a Ford or a Japanese vehicle. And I specify Japanese mostly because the Koreans still don't make good cars. And there's bad Japanese cars from all of the manufacturers too. The moral of the story from an engine guy's perspective, all engines suck. And they all have their problems. Some engines suck more than others. Some vehicles suck more than others. And there are brands that are traditionally going to sell and produce bad vehicles. Audi, Volkswagen Group are not one of them. But they're fun to make fun of because they make a lot of cars. That then becomes there's a lot of bad cars out there. So that's just the nature of things. Next question. Let's see our chat. Nothing of importance. Doug asks, hello, enjoy the videos. Have you had any experience boring cam caps on aluminum dual overhead cam heads? I have some K-series heads with damaged cam caps. All right, let's fucking talk about it. Let's see. I'll have to take a fucking drink for that because overhead cam line boring, that's a rabbit hole that most people aren't going to go down. And I've thought about it. I would love to be able to do that. And I've missed a few opportunities in my lifetime, in my career, where I could have purchased a Tobin ARP overhead cam line boring machine. I would have loved to buy one. I'm of the impression that there are not very many in the country. And I've seen two go up for sale in the past 12 years. I should have bought at least one of them, but I didn't. And I could probably build a fixture to line bore overhead cam heads in my mill. But there are a lot of things that get all kinds of screwed up when you start line boring overhead cam stuff. And that's usually got to do with the change of cam timing and valve train geometry. When you line bore ahead, you've got to be very conscious of not lowering the position of the camshafts closer to the position of the crankshaft. Bring those two center lines together, you're going to screw around with cam timing, you're going to screw around with the valve train geometry. If it's got a hydraulic lifter, you've got to make sure you've got the correct lifter preload. And if you don't, that's going to be an issue. If it's got a finger follower with a flat direct acting pad like a Datsun or a Honda, you might not be able to get the cam to even run on that little flat, usually a Stellite or a hardened steel pad, and you might start catching the edge of that wear pad with the lobe of the camshaft, or you might not be able to have the ability to set a proper valve lash. And if you can't do that, you're kind of screwed anyways. So overhead cam line boring, it's a thing. It's a very legitimate way to repair heads, but you've got to be very conscious of what you're changing when you fuck that shit up. On a K-Series Honda, like this guy's asking about, that has its own overhead cam housing, cam carrier, where the rocker shafts and everything are all their own assembly. And most manufacturers now are going to that sort of setup. And BMW for years has always had separate cam housings. Porsche, the Europeans pretty much have always had separate cam housings on most of their engines that mattered. So if you have a separate assembly, more than likely you'd be able to replace that or steal one off of another engine. If it's something that had cam caps, like a B series Honda or any Toyota, any Nissan, that assembly is going to be matched specifically to that cylinder head. You're not going to get to replace individual caps or rob caps from another pair of heads or another from a donor head. So don't have your caps. You've got damaged cam bores. You're screwed unless it's its own assembly. Oh, let's see. What are we saying? Somebody in the live feed said that some engines had the option for shell inserts for repairing cam journals. That's super common. I've run into that. That's usually an aftermarket deal, but kind of uncommon these days. It was really, really common in the late 80s, all through the 90s and into the early 2000s. Ford modular engines were very, very problematic because they have they don't have the greatest oiling systems. And there were a lot of situations where you'd lose oil pressure or oil supply to the top of the engine, and you'd screw up all the overhead cam journals. Okay, let's see. George in the chat is asking, or he said, the same conversation can be had about oversizing lifter bores. I guess I've got plenty of time here. I've got nothing else to do today. I'm going to be watching TV at 6 o'clock. And right now it's 2:15, so we've got all the time in the world. Oversized lifter bores. Let me tell you. That's something I do. And I used to do it on a fairly regular basis. And the margin for an oversized cam bore is significantly larger than the margin for repairing cam tunnels. A larger diameter bucket, 9 times out of 10, is always going to be better than a smaller one. The older an engine gets, the more history it's had, the more commonly you're going to run into worn out lifter bores. So there are now situations with like all of the Subaru EJ engines, like EJ 205, all WRX, all STI deals. Those lifter bores now, after the oldest ones are over 30 years old, those lifter bores are worn out, and it makes it hard to get a valve adjustment. They'll make more noise, and I've seen failures from lifter bores becoming worn out because things just get old. Porsche 944 is a really prime suspect because now you can't get new lifters. Lifters are $900 a piece. And when you only paid $900 for your car because 944s have no inherent value, you're going to have a hard time justifying $800 a piece, $900 a piece for new replacement lifters from Porsche. And the aftermarket doesn't supply a lifter for 944s. So what are you going to do? Years ago, I figured out you could use a Mercedes 300D lifter in a 944. Somebody suggested that to me. He goes, hey, can you figure out how to make this work? Because this lifter is a touch oversized, but overall, the heights seem to work out. It would probably work on a 944. And I figured out if you just bore the cam towers for the oversized Mercedes lifter, and you'd set it up for, say, 0.02 of clearance. Stop. Hang on. I'll be right back. I got something for you. And I had to make sure the camera on the phone was still filming. But I have these lifters. I'm going to show you. I'm a madman. Oh. There's things I do for love. All right. And I love starting shit. Okay, here we are, and I'm back. Another drink. Love it. Okay. They're oily. Gross. This is a Porsche 944 8-valve lifter. All 2.5 liter, all 2.7 liter, and all 3 liter 8-valve. If you know what that is, I see you. Very uncommon engine. This is a big boy. Very, very heavy. And they are not repairable. If you look in here, if you can see, there's stake marks on the hydraulic lifter assembly. Those stake marks are holding the hydraulic lifter assembly in place so that they cannot be disassembled. This is a Mercedes 300D lifter, brand new from Ina. Old used crap from the 1970s, 1980s, same garbage. 928, same garbage. Though my friend Marco argues that 928 is a real Porsche, which fine, it is. No Audi parts on the 928. 944s, on the other hand, great vehicle, great chassis. I would never own one again. Mercedes, Porsche, very, very similar. The skirt is only a touch taller, but from the button here to the top of the lifter assembly, there's only a 60 thousandths or 1.5 millimeter difference in height. This one, the Mercedes lifter, is a touch shorter. So these are about $35, $40 a piece. Brand new assembly, they work great. The only thing you have to do is bore your cam housings for this lifter, and you set them up at 1,008 of clearance. You can go up to 2 thousandths. I like to land somewhere in that realm. So that would be 0.018 to 0.02 thousandths of an inch. So bore the cam towers for this lifter, set up your clearance, and then you put a 60 thousandths lash cap on the tip of the 944 valves. There you go. You've got a Mercedes 300D lifter. And this is only 2 millimeters larger than the original lifters on the 944. So after 40 years, I'll find lifter bores on these 944s. Yeah, they're almost 40 years old now. I'll find lifter bores that have 3 or 4 thousandths worth of oil clearance. That's a problem. And 944s, they don't have great oiling systems. And that's where you'll run into situations where they'll bleed off, they'll be noisy. The oil film can't stay there when the engine's off overnight. So the oil system bleeds down all of its built up oil pressure. And then you go to, you get home, car sits overnight, you come out to it in the morning, start it up. And then it goes tick, 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 tick. That's what's going to happen when your oil clearances and all the parts in the oiling system are worn out. When you fix all the worn out bores and dimensions with new lifter bores like this, you've got, you basically resolve most of those problems. And it's just good for the engine. In final comment about 944s, don't let them sit and no, I'm sorry. Don't take those engines apart. They're bad engines. If you don't have a runability problem with the 944 engine, leave it alone. I get it. You blew a head gasket. It's got a couple scary scratches in the lifter bores or in the cylinder bores. Let it go. If the bores aren't all scored up, if you don't know what a bore score looks like on a 944, Google it. You'll find pictures. If your cylinders look like that, you got a problem. If there's just a couple little scratches in that engine, doesn't make any weird noises, leave that engine together. If you take it apart, you've immediately cost yourself 10 grand. All right, let's see. I LS swapped my 944, best thing I ever did. More power to you. We're talking about LS swapping 996s, which is sacrilege. And I'm sure they're awesome at the same time. JP, the check valve in the 944 heads fail. No, they don't. George asked me more about the lifter bores. Do you just mill the lifter bores or just rough machine the lifter bores and then hone, or is the boring enough? You can just bore the lifter bores. If you're running your machine well enough to, if you understand how basic machining works, you'll be able to leave a fine enough finish with just a boring bar. And if you want to make it a little smoother, you can hit it with a cross buff, which is something that I do sometimes also. Cross buff's a little tiny plastic abrasive in the shape of a ball. Actually, I have one. I'll go grab one and show you. Oh, boy. Okay. So these are from China. 3M makes these as well, but that's just a plastic abrasive. Put it in a drill, and you can just run this up and down your newly machined or used lifter bore to deburr it and generally just smooth out the lifter bore. I use these every day. Good product. If you buy them on Amazon from the Chinese, you could buy a pack of 100 for like, I don't know, $20. From 3M, these cross buffs are something to the effect of like $4 a piece. They're better. They're not $3 more, or they're not $4 a piece. Better. So, as much as I like to support, I want to say, more ethical corporations, the People's Republic of China, they sure know how to play economies of scale. But there's also probably some human rights violations mixed in with that. Okay. We're arguing about check valves. If the 944s don't have a true check valve, it's a ball that runs onto a taper inside of the cylinder head with an oil restrictor and a spring on either side. That check valve just stops oil from bleeding down from the top end back into the oil pan. Okay. I don't have a garage, so I let the shops do the work. That's the right move. Don't use water in the heads. Alcohol is cheap and won't cause rust. I've poured beers into the cooling system of my pickup. When I finally replace that engine, I would probably expect there to be a lot of corrosion. Lately, I've been pouring the excess mop water when I mix it in the bucket into the pickup, and every time I go top off the coolant reservoir, it gets a little bit bubbly. So we'll see. He's asking me about lapping valves. Who's asking me about lapping valves? Oh, we're talking about Lapping valves. Yeah, I don't want to talk about lapping valves. We do that sparingly, and it's when I'm trying to diagnose a problem. Okay, let's talk about it. Lapping valves. Lapping valves or lapping compound in regards to engines and engine rebuilding should only be used in 2025 for diagnosing a problem. There are a few situations where you are going to improve your valve job quality by lapping the valves. There is always a different issue. And usually it's just stuff's worn out. So seat inserts are extra hard. Valves are extra hard. Those things aren't going to beat into each other the way you think they're going to. Lapping the valve not only changes the geometry or the shape of the valve face. Don't ask me to draw. I've had too much to drink, but I'm going to anyways. All right. Okay. Let's draw my best valve. All right. Is that hard to see? That is hard to see. Here's a valve. You've got a perfectly flat valve face, just as it was ground. Once you start going in there and lapping this seat or this valve face into the valve seat, you are now taking that abrasive and you're wearing a cup into the valve face. And you might not be able to identify that with your bare eye, with your naked eyes. So you are now removing material, changing the geometry of the valve. And because you only see a gray line and your eyes just aren't able to identify what that valve face is shaped like, you know, usually due to lack of experience or just lack of understanding, lapping you're going to miss that you just screwed up that valve face. And then when you go to look at the valve seat, it's so hard that valve seat's going to hold up a lot better to the valve face. It's not going to have a cup like that. And if it does, you probably sat there forever and a year just sitting there lapping your life away. And most lapping compound that's readily and commercially available is too rough. Anybody in industry is going to, that laps a valve, they're either going to use something extremely fine, like toothpaste, which isn't going to embed material into the valve or the valve seat, or they're going to use something really fine that's a silicon carbide grease blend or paraffin blend, like your Clover branded lapping compound, and it's going to be like a 600 grit or an 800 grit. It's not going to be enough to change the geometry. And we're not sitting there for 2 minutes, 3 minutes at a time, waiting for that valve face to come in. We're going to give it 3 or 4 seconds worth of lapping at the most. If that valve face doesn't come right in with the lapping compound, that means that there's a geometry issue, or there's something wrong with the valve seat concentricity, the seat face quality, or there's something wrong with the valve job. All right. Let's see. El Kuje asks, did the machine shop industry stop lapping valves? I took my cylinder head to a machine shop and the machinist said they stopped doing that due to time consumption. If that's the only reason you stopped your valve job or stopped lapping valves, you don't care or you don't understand. Probably a combination of both in many cases. Most shops, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, it's in one of the questions, most shops bought all of their machines in the 80s and in the 90s. And in that time, it was a really great time to be an engine machinist, a really great time to get into the industry. That was a lot more lucrative then than it was now. And, you know, you got to understand, in the 90s, we had engines coming apart for no fucking reason. The Ford Focus with the overhead cam 2-liter, they were dropping seats left and right. The dealerships couldn't keep up with the supply, and that was at a time where most of these engines, you know, engine cores weren't readily available. And on warranty, a lot of these dealerships, they would have just set an engine or a cylinder head out to be warrantied and repaired. So it's just a different time. So, you know, we had guys coming in with 4-liter Jeeps, 2-liter Pinto style Ranger heads, 3.8 Mustangs, 2-liter Fords. You had all the D-Series Hondas with head gasket problems. You name it, every manufacturer had active major engine issues. Those engines came apart all the time. And then it was a little more enticing to do a repair on an engine, because you could have, you know, in the 90s, early 2000s, in the 80s, you could have had heads off on a vehicle in a couple hours. There were few exceptions. Like Nissan 300ZX, you probably don't want to pull heads on that. You know, and all the V6 Audis, major undertaking to get those engines apart. So maybe you'd get replacement engines from the OEM a lot easier or more commonly, but most of the brands had engine problems, and those engines would end up at machine shops for repair. That said, you're also coming off of, you know, it wouldn't be uncommon to have somebody with a K-car Chrysler, or, you know, their regular commuters, which were pretty poor cars. The 80s was a very bad time for vehicles because of emissions, and nobody had any money unless you were Toyota, you know, or one of the Japanese automakers. You know, cars were from the 80s and the 70s that people were driving around and commuting with. Those engines came apart all the time. You weren't getting a 200,000 mile engine. There were few exceptions. So becoming a machine shop, opening a machine shop in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, that was a great time to get in it. Now, it's not so lucrative. So that the guys who are in it and have been around forever, moral of the story is, those are older shops. And most of those guys, they were able to tool up and become a machine shop for 50 grand. You can't do that today. Opening up a machine shop, I'll stop here. So we're going to talk about this. Opening up a machine shop these days, it's $250,000. It doesn't have to start off that way, but to keep up with what the general public expects to see in a machine shop, and there are issues caused by marketing that give this impression to the general public that if you walk into a shop and they don't have a particular machine, that's not a good shop, which just really isn't how it is. So we'll come back to this, because this is a really interesting and complicated and very subjective topic that I talk to machinists and machine shops about on a daily basis. So let's see. What else do we got? Nobody else in the chat. Let's move on to the next question. Oh, the next one is what we were just talking about. Dagan Farkas, I had a question for the Q&A. Are there any books you'd recommend for learning how to do engine work? I'm 23 and struggle to wrap my marble smooth brain around things at times in the home shop. Okay. Let's talk about books and education. That's going to require more drink. There are a few schools you can go to where you can learn engine machining. I did not go to one of them. I got on the job training. Um, School of Automotive Machinists in Texas, great school. They produce a lot of uh, serious engine guys, cylinder head guys that end up working in the racing industry, and then the rare few that will just go out and go to work for themselves. All of these guys are hot rodders. They have a passion for it. Engine machining is that kind of thing where you don't dabble in it. The risk and the liability is too high, and it just doesn't work the way you think it's going to work. If you have a half in, half out kind of approach with the engine industry, it's not you're all in and you commit and you learn and you listen and you ask questions. If you don't, or if you have too much of an ego to ask questions, it's not going to work. And you're going to learn some very hard and expensive lessons. I was one of those people. I've learned expensive lessons and I've learned hard lessons. And on top of that, I don't care who you got your education from. If you went to SAM or went to, there's a school. The abbreviation is what is that? It's a community college. If any of you can Google that, it's like UNOH and type that into the chat. Whatever that abbreviation is for, let me know what that school is. I want to say it's a community college in Ohio that has an automotive machining program that's really good. I might have that wrong, or it's Utah. I don't know. I don't think the Mormons care too much about engines. I don't care where you got your education from. You're going to come into the industry really green, and you're going to be book smart. And then I've witnessed this a few times. A lot of guys who come out of these name brand schools, they're going to come out and go, well, we didn't do it this way. And, they get into the field, make it into this great shop. Then inevitably, a lot of guys are going to make the comment, well, we didn't do it that way at school. And that's an okay comment if you follow it with, why do you do this specific thing this way? Or why do you do it your way? If you stop at, well, we didn't do it this way, you're missing the point. And you're going to have a very hard time in this industry, because engine machining is one of those things where there's no one way to do a job per se. You're going to walk in and go and see you do it one way, and then that shop across town who has a great reputation, and they're your colleague, your friend, your competitor, doesn't matter how you look at it, they're probably going to land at that same place as you. Your quality could be the same, but your approaches are very different. And you'll find parallels in both of them, in both approaches, and you'll find differences in both approaches. And you got to have an open mind that there are very few cases or situations in this industry where your one way is the way. So if you're new to this industry, I'm sorry. And ask a lot of questions, be humble, and listen to your peers. If they're not complete idiots, you'll probably learn something. Oh, boy. Now, books. There's one book in particular that I recommend if you're in this industry and you want to learn something. That is the Sudden book. This is your Bible. This was written, I think, in the early 2000s. Might have been the 90s. I'm not sure. 1998 by John G. Edwards. He is not with us anymore. But that was... oh, there we go. Oh, there was all kinds of things happening in the live chat. John G. Edwards can be found on YouTube as Costa Mesa R&D or Fiat Nuts, like Fiat the car, Fiat, and then nuts. So Nutz. Great videos. I watched those as a kid, trying to get enough information to learn how to do what it is that I do now and share with you guys on YouTube. It's a rabbit hole to go down. These videos are all, they're like 15 years old at this point, so the quality is not as great, but it's great information. He didn't go into detail about how to do things specifically. He did a lot of showing how they did it. But John G. Edwards wrote the Sunnin Book, which is a handbook about every single process that you're going to run into in a machine shop, or all the processes that you'll do as a machinist in a machine shop. And though this is from 1998, and CNCs have become a very common thing that you'll find in machine shops, the core foundation of your education is the basics. And if you don't understand the basics and the core of what it is you're doing, you're going to suck as a machinist. I don't care how fancy your CNC machines are. You're better when you understand what exactly you're doing. So inside of this, it'll show literally everything about every process. It's inspection, honing, valve jobs, valve guides, whatever you want. The Sunnin Book is what you should be starting with. And then there's various other textbooks that you'll run into. This is one that a technical college in Minnesota was having people buy. And this is also a very good book. There's another one by not Mike Lewis. The AERA book is Gary Lewis. He's a guy out of Sonoma here. He was a teacher at De Anza College in San Jose. He did the book for the American Engine Rebuilders Association. They contracted with him and then eventually bought the rights to the book. That textbook is very good as well, and I've read that thing cover to cover several times. Oh, let me check my battery on the phone real quick. All right, battery life is good. Mics are still running. Textbooks are hard to come by. I had a bunch of textbooks that I really wish I saved back in 2017 when my house burned down with the wildfire that ran through Sonoma County. If I hadn't been drinking, I probably would remember the name, but that's a thing. All right, let's look at these comments. I don't know what's happening here. We're talking about valve lapping. Okay. I am Griff says, hey Josh, hey to you. Hey is for horses. 3.8 heads would have literal chunks fall off of them. I don't remember that. I remember they would come in and I think they would crack in weird places in between the valves, coming out of the exhaust seats, and they would just leak water all the time. And they were very rarely rebuildable. But now all those cars are gone, so that's not a machine shop's problem anymore. I'm not sure what the best budget surfacing machine would be. Probably an old Bridgeport. I don't know. No, an old Bridgeport is not what you want for surfacing heads because they're usually worn out. Unless you're really dedicated to making this a hobby of yours, don't buy machines. Find a machine shop that you trust. There's such a thing called UPS. You can ship your heads. Not having a machine shop in town shouldn't stop you from getting good machine work. So don't buy machines. It's not worth it. It's hard to justify being a machinist or getting into this industry because the cost of the barrier of entry is so extremely high, and operating costs are very high for very low return, and that's an industry wide problem. Let's use CNC machines. You might have $200,000 in a machine that for sleeving blocks. You might net $1,000 per block. So you're gonna, you're gonna sit there having an ROI on $200,000 with a payment, with financing that has to be paid off in 4 years. So you've got a number you've got to hit every single year or every single month just to make the payment. How many blocks is that? How many other shops are around doing the same thing for similar money? It's a cutthroat business. Most new machine shops aren't going to be able to hang in there. It's tough. And if you do above average work, you're going to stand out in a crowd of very average or subpar machinists. I might be really great at cylinder heads. I'm not great at doing blocks. I can do a block. It takes me a very long time to assemble a short block and do it right. I don't have that anal retentive personality when it comes to assembling a short block. Not my thing. Plus, spent a lot of years talking and learning about air. So I'm going to focus on the air part. Somebody in the chat said the name of the university. Where is it? University of Northwestern Ohio has a very great engine machining program. So, and I've seen a lot of great people come out of that school. I've seen a lot of bad people come out of that school. And I would assume it's a lot like the UTI thing from the early 2000s. I mean, they're still around now, but you get out of it what you put in it. So if you're going to half-ass your way through that really fucking expensive education, pay attention, and then pay more attention and really submerge yourself in it, because those few years that you're there, it goes by quick. And even then, it just gets you ahead of the curve. You still need to pay attention and really take advantage of that experience you have, because if you're at a higher end shop, they're not going to put up with stupid mistakes. There is always room for mistakes in this industry. That's part of the learning process. Most shops can absorb so much, but if you're a fool and you suck, find a different job, dude. And that's okay. Enjoy engines in your own time. It's way better and way more enjoyable for most people. All right. Let's see. More questions. What's the proper way to package a block or head to ship out? I've heard a lot of bad ways to do it. I'm making a jig from wood and bolting it to it. This is going to be on a small pallet. What the hell are you bolting to a pallet? I hope it's not a pair of heads. If it's a block, I mean, that works. You can certainly ship a block on a pallet, and if it's heavy enough, you would have to. Most shipping services, most commonly FedEx and UPS, have a 150-pound limit on what you can ship ground, and if it's beyond that, it goes freight. So, and you probably don't want to ship a cast iron block in a cardboard box UPS ground anyways, because it'll probably get thrown off the back of a truck. The lighting's all messed up now. I'm putting the hat back on. Freight's a great way to ship a block. If it's a little aluminum Honda block, find a box, pack it well. As long as you can grab the box and shake it and you don't hear it bouncing around in the box, it's probably going to be fine. And a good idea is to always double box something. So pack it really well in one box, then put that inside of another bigger box, and you'll be good to go. Ship it, it'll be fine. If it's used and it's on the way to the machine shop, unless it's something super precious, a couple dings here and there isn't the end of the world, but it'll always be cheaper to overpack it than it will be to pay the machine shop to repair damage from shipping. And you're not going to get paid out from your insurance There's so much fine print with the insurance. Take the time to pack your stuff. If you don't have the experience on how to do it, ask somebody, ask your machinist on how to pack something. Maybe they'll give you some tips. And that's probably something I can do a video on, so that I can bless the machining world with better packing skills. That didn't come out very naturally. D10, Detroit? Or no. Excavator? D10 says, thank you for the time to do this, by the way. I've got all the time in the world since it's Sunday, and I got nothing better to do because I have no money. So we're drinking at home. All right. Maestro books from Harry Pello are a good resource for VW Porsche air-cooled 4-cylinders. I don't know, maybe. I'm currently looking for an affordable split ball gauge for measuring valve guides. Are there any affordable ones? Shars is a Chinese supplier of measuring tools and machining tools. I'm sure they have a small bore dial bore gauge. I'll go grab one and show you what that looks like. Guys, I don't feel good. I've been drinking for a while. Helios, made in Western Germany. And if you don't know, this is a product of the 80s. Helios was a European brand that turned into Fowler eventually. So, with Western Germany becoming dissolved with the fall of the wall, I'm sure that's probably what ended the company. But yeah, they got absorbed into Fowler. So that said, I'm sure Fowler has a small gauge or small bore dial bore gauge. And it's literally the same dial bore gauge that you would see when you talk to, that it's the same style dial bore gauge that you would see when somebody's measuring a cylinder. It's just a little tiny version, and it only measures on 2 points, just like a regular dial bore gauge. So, set up the dial indicator with a micrometer, set your 0, and you'd be able to read to the 10,000ths, or even better if you had a higher quality one. I don't use this a whole lot anymore. I'd prefer to use a pin gauge. That's like a go, no-go tool. So if it's too small, if it's smaller than the bore, it'll fall in. If it's bigger than the ball, it won't go in. Or than the bore, it won't go in. So pin gauges is what I use now. But before that, and still on occasion to measure guide wear, I'll use a small bore dial bore gauge. You can find these on eBay. I bought this on eBay. It was $200. A new Mitutoyo, you're going to be into it for almost $1,000. I wouldn't be afraid of buying a Chinese tool if you're a home gamer or if you're new to this. You'll spend thousands and thousands of dollars on measuring tools as a machinist, and it's never going to end because the technology continues to get better. So don't be afraid of used measuring tools. If you buy something, you just make sure you buy it in working condition. And if you find an issue or if you want to make sure it's solid, send it out to go get checked out. There's a lot of measuring tool repair shops in the country that will usually rebuild your measuring tools as well. So I can send these micrometers out to be resurfaced and calibrated and certified. And it's probably something I should do also, because these haven't been certified in at least 7 years now. I set them, I calibrate them myself maybe once a year, but that might be a little overkill for me even. And I think I paid under $200 for this thing. So just look for deals on eBay. I mean, I just bought probably almost a $2,000 boring head that's for used for resurfacing Porsches for under $1,000 on eBay, and that's showing up next week, and you'll get a video out of that once I finish building all the extra tooling I need. So, you know, it'll be cool. It's a deal with a little boring head that you grab a collar on, and when you grab that collar, it expands the cutter outward automatically. Okay, what's the proper way to pack a block? We've done that. What's up from Missouri? Whoa. We're getting international here. What's up, dude? I lost a 4S 911 once in shipping. Sucked even with insurance. Opinions on cheaper aluminum heads like Speedmaster. I need another drink. And I'm out of ice. So we're going to get real. Oh, jeez. We're going to get a little wild here. Most Chinese heads come from the same place. There's a few, you know, like 2 or 3 main foundries that the Chinese heads are going to come from. So a lot of them are a lot of the same. I've used a lot of Speedmaster heads. They're fine. They're mediocre copies of copies of copies. I would never take one out of the box and bolt it on. Not worth it. That's asking for trouble. Opinions on Speedmaster heads. Speedmaster sells some great quality, economical products most of the time. If it's a cylinder head and you got to have that Speedmaster, maybe you like the name, maybe it sounds cool when you're bragging to your friends. You know, if you ask me, that only tells other people that you have no money or you have bad taste. Take those Speedmaster China heads and have them gone through. Do a new valve job, put new guides in it, and you know, you got some good aluminum. I would rather do that than taking some old iron, worthless iron that's been putting around forever, that's had 3 different people working on it. Than I'd rather have the Chinese head than the old iron that's been around the block once or twice. All right. You're in Sonoma County. Do you accept new work, or do you just do it casually? I don't do work for people, especially if I don't know you. I do work for my friends and people in my circle and whatever I want to share on YouTube. I design heads and intakes as a freelancer. So when I have work, I'm working for the same people, and that's how I make a living. But that's pretty sparing. You know, I very rarely get to pick up work like that. So the rest of the time I'm screwing around, helping out other shops, helping out people. I answer questions, and now I'm doing the YouTube stuff, which is another stream of income, but it's a small amount. Hopefully one day. And then I spend time at home and take care of my family. So no, I do not take extra work, and I don't want your work. I would be happy to refer you to somebody reputable. After I interview, though, because I'm not going to send some jabroni to one of my boys. Hopefully you're not a jabroni. If you need a referral to a shop I saw in New York, I could send you to 3 different shops off the top of my head on a referral. But you can email me. Find my email. I'm not going to give it to you. All right. Let's see. Thoughts on AMC iron heads from Brazil? I have no opinion. I know nothing. Thought on the split ball bore gauge versus the Sudden P310. In the phone version of this, I will go and insert the picture of the Sudden P310. But that's Sunnin's guide measuring device. It uses 2 valves inside of a setting fixture, and you clamp down the two valves parallel with each other, and then you insert the dial bore gauge and set up your zero off of the two valves that you clamped into this setting fixture. And then that sets the zero to your valve stem diameter. So naturally, you got to be conscious of whatever the size of your intake valve is versus the size of the exhaust valve, because usually those stems are going to vary in diameter unless you have an aftermarket valve. So you can't do one intake, one exhaust. You'll screw up your measurements. But I found over the years, and this might be the case with a worn out P310, the P310 is good for getting comparative measurements, and you have to understand how to use them because they'll get a different measurement when you push the gauge down into the bore versus you pulling the gauge out of the bore. So you've got to understand how to use it and get a consistent measurement. Same thing with the split ball indicator, but it's a little more forgiving. But it's it's a little finicky. It's not my favorite tool. I think just a standard split ball gauge would be, or a pin gauge would be better than using the Sunnen tool. And most of those are over 30 years old at this point. You're probably not going to get a good one anymore. And I don't think you can buy parts for them either. Sunnen has discontinued all support of their automotive machines. And they're just doing cylinder honing now. So, if you call them for parts, what's left is what they've got. In fact, I think those parts ended up at Goodson. You'll get a print from Sunnen of whatever part it is you need. They'll go, here you go, make it yourself. Sunnen's a great company. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, if you've got an old Sunnen automotive machine, you are going to be buying parts from the aftermarket. I've got one in the corner. Okay. I'll send you a pair of Type 4 heads that are sus. Nope. Keep that Volkswagen crap away from me. Have you attempted to re-sleeve an engine on your Bridgeport? No, I will, but no. All the engines I work on, actually, no, I have sleeved motorcycle cylinders on the Bridgeport. I haven't sleeved, a regular car engine in the Bridgeport, and I'll tell you why. That's because my mill only has a 5-inch stroke on the spindle, which means it can only travel 5 inches. And most cylinder bores for engines that I work on are going to be 6 inches or taller. So I would then have to lift the table up or raise the knee on my machine, and I don't have an auto feed for that. It doesn't work. And someone's asking me if I have a 36-inch mill. No, I have a 9 by 42-inch mill. Still on the smaller side. You really need to be 48 inches or larger to work on most cylinder heads. Okay, what's next? Willow 4232 from Reddit asks, what are the most trusted brands for industry? I'm talking about everything from decking blocks to heads to installing seats and honing. And whose specs do you follow when it comes to the repair? Oh boy. Oh, that's a rabbit hole. Okay, so the main brands that you'll see tossed around would be Sunnen, Surdy, Rattler, T&S, who else? RMC, Haas, and Robbins, all of which make very different machines for different purposes, and basically all of them have dabbled in CNC capability of some sort. And then you're going to run into a lot of companies that don't exist anymore, like Tobin Arp, IDL, Quickway, who still exists, they make valve grinders, and then Sue. There's the list goes on, but those are pretty much all of the main companies that you'll run into. Nobody particularly makes the best stuff, and now due to great marketing, you're going to see Rottler is now a name brand. Rottler's been around since the late 80s, okay? For their entire lifetime, up until, I want to say, the past 5 years, Rottler has been greatly regarded as a company that sells disposable equipment. There used to be a guy around here that would drive around with a semi-truck and demo Rottler equipment. And you used to be able to purchase a surfacer, a cylinder hone, and a boring bar as a package deal. So that was everything you needed to be a full-on machine shop, right? That was in the early 90s, late 80s. It's 2025, okay? Those same shops probably still have those same machines. And it's kind of a problem because those salesmen also, for years and years and years, would tell people that the machine does the work for you. And that then would get told and retold so many times, and it created this mentality that the machines don't need to be maintained. So those machines, if they're in great shape, were great machines then, and they can be now. But those older machines, they're worn out. Or standards have changed, so what was okay 30 years ago is not okay now. But you'll still run into shops that just have those machines. Now, that doesn't go to say that you can't do a good job with new equipment, or, you can only do a good job with new equipment, because that's not the case. It's an operator thing. But, I wouldn't be afraid of seeing a shop, walking into a shop and seeing they're doing valve jobs on a Surdy 100. That was an expensive machine then. A Surdy 100 was like 35 grand. 30 grand in the 90s, but you could have bought a Sunin VGS 20 for 20. 18 grand. It does the same thing, right? But at the time, that Surdy was the hot shit. And it's still a hot commodity today. There's nothing wrong with the Surdy 100. And those machines, a lot of them are over 30 years old. There's nothing wrong with the VGS 20 either. You got to know what the difference is between both of them, what they can do, what they can't do. And if you understand that, you're good. And I had a fairly new seat and guide machine when I had my shop that was 6 years old at the time I purchased it. And it was a Winona machine built by a company in Argentina. That was a machine called a Dimpar, and it was marketed against the Rottler SG8, which was meant for doing like big diesels, or really good giant valve seats. I outgrew that machine, but I sold that to a friend of mine who did a bunch of repairs and modifications to it. He still uses it to this day, and that thing, the date code on that was like June of 2012. That was a good machine, but that was also an inexpensive machine, and in the wrong hands definitely could have done a bad job on it. Honing, we're all crazy about CNC honing, and it's awesome. These Rottler machines and these newer Sunin machines, they do a phenomenal job, and it takes all the a lot of human error out of it, and the machine doesn't get tired, right? But great tools. I also wouldn't worry if I walked into a shop and they had a Winona air assist or a very rudimentary power stroker machine that's semi-automated or not really automated. You've got to have a guy standing in front of the machine. I wouldn't be afraid of seeing that. I have a friend of mine who works on very high-end European engines right down the street. these are $50,000-$60,000 engines, and he's using that equipment. He just did, I think he had 3 or 4 Lamborghini Huracan blocks sitting on the floor that he just sleeved to go out and run Texas 2K this weekend. And he's doing it on this machine from the early 90s. The difference with him versus Joe Schmo machine shop on the other side of town that'll bore your LS and hone it for $200 and he gets $1,500 is that he has all the tools that let him measure the cylinder finish, and he actually hits those numbers that your ring manufacturer is calling for, and that's why that engine lasts a whole season or 2 seasons or 3, and Joe Schmo exploded in the pit. So, it's a very different standard and approach in how you operate the machine. That's the difference. So at the end of the day, you're going to walk in and you'll find Sun machines, Robbins, Surdy, TNS, Newen, RMC, Haas, there's A-Trump machines. You'll find Centroid. You'll find all of the above and then some. And when you get into the higher end of things like real race shops, you're going to find they're just using CNC machines. Like they're using all their valve jobs are done on a CNC, like a Newen or a Sunnen, or no, a Newen or a Surdy machine. And all of their block work is going to be done in a Sunnen SV machine or a Rottler diamond hone. And then their block machining is going to be done in a Doosan or a DMG Mori, in a real machining center. So, and they'll be making their own parts. So there's very different scales. Just because you've got the top-notch machines doesn't mean you're going to do top shit work. Next question. Same 3 guys in the chat. Thank you for being here. Most guys have left. We're going to continue on. Okay, and we're on our last question. Another friendly dragon from Reddit asks, what percentage of machine shops or what percentage of modern engines are now disposable garbage you can't overhaul? Local machine shops are closing left, right, and center. A friend is building an 80s Samurai motor and is having an issue finding a shop to assemble it. They'll do the machine work and they'll kick the bare parts out the door. That's it. What happened? What happened is this race to the bottom that I referenced earlier. So, it's a big thing in this industry for all the shops in town to see each other as competitors. And this used to be a big problematic mentality until recently. So in this decade, that mentality has started to go away, I'd say. And I witnessed a lot of that sentiment go away. And now, if you're a machine shop that matters, the other shops in town, they're not your competitor. They're just, they're your peers. They're the people you're around. It's cool. You're cool, I'm cool. And then we'll refer work to each other. That wasn't how it was before. If this shop was doing all this work that you wanted, they were taking that work away from you. That's your competitor. You don't want to help them, So there was a big battle and a big crazy mentality. And what came with that also was trying to get the work in. The prices would just progressively go lower and lower and lower until now you're not making any money. You're making those machine payments. Finally, those machine payments are done. You're going to pocket that money and repeat that process until you're 70. Now this whole mentality is starting to change, but you've got that same old machine shop that you've had for 40 years. You're not going to want to upgrade your equipment. You're at the end of your career. No one wants to take over your shop because it's not really a moneymaker. On paper, it makes more sense to go be a plumber. You'll make more money as a landscaper. So, who's going to take it over? Nobody. machine shop closes, all your equipment ends up on auction for 25 cents on the dollar. Because you thought you could get 100 grand for your machines you paid 50 for back in 1991. And then it just ends up at another machine shop. There's no new blood. There's no younger guys like me going out there and buying the equipment and, making a name for themselves. It's a very uncommon thing now. And the game's changed. It's a very different thing. The liability is so much higher. The scale in the skill level, the minimum skill level required now is so much higher to be able to wrap your head around all these more and more complicated systems. Who's going to want that job? It cost me $1,200 in tools to do this job I just made $800 on. And I got to keep doing that again and again until I go and I run out of new engines, which that's never going to happen. So that's why you're going to see less and less machine shops, because there's no new blood getting into the industry. And quite frankly, I'm going to be in this industry my whole career until I decide it's finally time to stop and become a teacher. That's not happening anytime soon, but I very regularly discourage people from getting into the engine machining trade as a means of making a living. It's not a good industry. It'll beat you down. And if you can't handle that, you're not going to, you're not going to last very long. Okay. There's another part of that question. My friend is building an 80 Samurai motor. They don't want to assemble it. It's not that a 1.4 liter or whatever the hell it is, 1.5 liter Suzuki Samurai engine is complicated. It's that as soon as you assemble an engine, you've just taken on all that risk. And depending on what state you're in, I think in California, that engine owns you for 12,000 miles or something to that effect. So, that doesn't matter if you've got fine print saying it's not your problem. There's a law. You are committed to that engine. You've got to go through a whole slew of paperwork, and you better remember to have your guy sign it and make sure he knows what he's signing up for if you're not going to have a warranty, because the law is on their side, not your side. So as a machine shop, it kind of sucks. You don't know the skill level of that guy who just walked in off the street who you never met, wanting you to put his Samurai engine together. He might take your engine, let it sit out in the side yard for 2 weeks, then throw it in the truck after it got filled up with rainwater, and there's rats going inside of it, pissing and shitting on the thing. And he's got it halfway together and is sitting there cranking the engine, can't get it to start because he's got something set up wrong. And he's just sitting there filling it up with fuel and floods the thing and smokes the rings. And then he calls you up and goes, "Hey, this engine you built me is a piece of shit." Well, why? Because it won't run. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And then it's an argument, and as a machine shop, you shouldn't lay over and go, "Hey, oh yeah, I believe you. Take my money." That's not how that works. You've got to protect your ass, and then you go and say, "Hey, I'm sorry you're having a problem. Let's talk about it." And then we start peeling back the layers, and usually you'll find the dude's incompetent or something's wrong or made a mistake. Sometimes people make mistakes. That's life. Now, most people I know, if their client makes a dumb mistake, "Hey, listen, man, this isn't on me, but get that engine out. I'll help you. We'll deal with, we'll get this thing fixed up for the cost of the parts, or, I'll help you out." That's a pretty common standard, because we all care. We want ourselves to run well. We want you to enjoy the product that we just slaved over. Once you start trying to screw each other, that's where things get really convoluted. And the reality is, consumer law is on the side of the consumer. The only way you protect yourself as a machine shop is to inundate them with paperwork, which means if you've got an agreement that's not outlined by your state laws or your local laws, that whatever you said to him saying, hey, if you have a problem, call me, that's a load of crap in the eyes of the law. You need it all written down. So you got to do your due diligence, have them sign your paperwork, get your approvals, communicate, write down all of your communication. Most machine shops are run by people who are bad at business. So you're going to see a lot of people who have been burned time and time again, either by themselves or bad clients or bad decision-making in an interaction. And these people are bad at business. They're just going to bow out of assembling engines because it's a big liability. And that's probably why Joe Schmo Machine Shop won't build your boy an 80s Suzuki Samurai engine. Also, Suzuki Samurai. Cool truck, but are they still around anymore? And I would say that is it. I thought I was going to finish all of my drink. And here we are at the end. I'm going to go inside. I'm going to sit in different AC. I've got a lot of AC in here. It's very comfortable. And I'm going to pour some ice and enjoy the rest of my Sunday. And probably turn on the barbecue. We're going to grill some stuff. And thank you guys for sitting here for an hour and a half. Let's see. It was nice to listen. Thanks for being a part of the live chat. I'm going to see if I can save this footage and do a little back and forth, hopefully, when I go to edit this tonight, because this is going to go up tonight. I want this to be a regular thing. And then, in fact, I'm going to start doing these videos where I'm just talking to other machinists and doing this exact thing, sharing these questions with peers of mine, and we talk about it. Or we just sit there and drink and eat and bullshit for 2 hours. I don't know, but this is going to be a thing. So I enjoyed this, and I was a little bit less nervous talking to nobody, well, a few people, talking to a screen than I thought I would have been. And thank you guys for being here and being active. So I appreciate it. And also, this is normal Josh, not camera Josh. So if you missed the personality, you can catch that in the videos. So thank you guys. It was a fun hour and a half. I'll see you on the actual YouTube video tonight after I watch The Last of Us. All right. Appreciate it, you guys. See ya. And that's the live stream over. Cheers, you guys. Thanks for staying till the end.